It's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, 𝐒𝐢𝐿ColeEnterprises.com for more info. Email me through Benji@𝐒𝐢𝐿ColeEnterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is internationally syndicated solely due to the love and support that you all continue to give. We're available across all major distributors, and as long as you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in, because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Sidney P. Little. And we're going to be discussing Sidney's incredible book, Caleb's Journey. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, man, it's a lot of other places, but I'm going to tell you where you need to go to gather it all, because Sidney has two personal websites that you're going to want to check out. One is entitled 𝐒𝐢𝐼𝐻journey.com. Another one, SidneyLittle.com. There, gather more information on him, on this fantastic book. Check out another book that he's written. That one is entitled One Step from Glory, America in World War I. Hyperlink set up to take you to the purchasing page. Man, just do yourself a favor. All right. 𝐒𝐢𝐼𝐻journey.com, SidneyLittle.com. Head on over there today. And before I go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out the fact that Sidney was brought to us by Book Domain, LLC. So for my writers listening in right now, if you've gone through your process, man, you've invested your time, your sweat, your tears at moments, developing that masterpiece, and now you're in a tough position because you need some assistance moving it. Head on over to bookdomainllc.com and gather all of the ways that their fantastic and qualified team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Sidney here on the line. People, how does a person hold on to hope when their world is literally crumbling all around them? That's a powerful question, and it's one that, in my opinion, man, it feels incredibly relevant today. And it's what's at the heart of Sidney's stunning novel, Caleb's Journey. This is a historical fiction that pulls you directly into the ancient streets of Jerusalem. From the miracles of Jesus to the horrors of the Roman siege. You see, this book is a powerhouse, people. It is a fantastic glimpse into the past. But trust me when I tell you, read in between the lines. Utilize this book for much more than entertainment, because I promise you, yeah, a snapshot into the past, but could also be a very informative journey for where we're heading in the future. Sidney, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you for being a guest, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I'm glad to be able to speak with you and talk about my book.
Listen, Sidney, the pleasure is all ours, man. We are looking forward to talking about your book because, like I mentioned, remarkably compelling, a great informative novel, but also can be, and if you choose to utilize it and look through that lens, could be a great snapshot and almost a telltale guide of where we are currently going. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but let's start off at that foundation, man. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, Sidney.
I'm retired. I had run my own business for a number of years, and once I sold that, I flew as a flight instructor out at Kirtland Air Force Base here in Albuquerque. And since then, I've been trying to write and teach. I've worked with a prison ministry here in New Mexico.
Listen, Sidney, let's jump in, man. The anchor is all about Caleb's journey. First and foremost, tell us a little bit more about the book before we cover some of the themes and messages.
The book was written basically for believers in Christ, but also for those who are interested in history. The history of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., there was very little written. So I did an awful lot of research trying to find out what exactly happened and how all of this turmoil came about back in the year of 69, 70 A.D. And it took a lot of digging but I was intrigued by it. I've also done a lot of Bible study through my life. I've taught adult Bible study in my church. And so I was intrigued by of course, Jesus' walk on earth, his crucifixion and resurrection. So that brought me to writing Caleb's Journey. It's an interesting story. It's a story about a man who travels through his life from his teenage years up through his years in old age.
Yeah.
And I think people will find it intriguing.
Listen, Sidney, I have no doubt, man. It is remarkably compelling. So people are going to gravitate towards it. And my follow-up question is going to cover inspiration, but I'm really curious, man, because most novels set in this particular era, they'll focus on disciples, they'll focus on zealots, or even the Roman officials. You went a different route. What inspired you to tell this monumental story through the eyes of I guess for lack of a better term, a quote-unquote simple man like Caleb?
Have you ever thought, and I'll start out with a question, have you ever thought what it would be like to live at a different time and to view historical events as they unfold in your eyes? And I got thinking that maybe this would be for me to view Jesus, to view the destruction of Jerusalem, and be able to present it to people so they could see it with their own eyes. It's one reason that I wrote the book in first person, because I felt they could see what I saw as I wrote these lines down on paper.
There you have it, man. Okay. All right. Listen, I love it. And I'm right there with you, Sidney, because yeah, absolutely. I've been there. I try to view things in my imagination as from my lens, from my perspective, being in this history and what that would look like. And that is something, like I mentioned, people, remarkably compelling. So I'm right there with you. And I love the fact that you took it there. Beyond Caleb, which secondary character, Sidney, did you most enjoy writing and why?
Of course, there's Christ, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the second. Main character besides Caleb was his captor. It was a centurion who had captured Caleb as he tried to enter Jerusalem to free some believers from a civil war that was taking place inside the city itself before the siege started. And that character's name was Arius, and Arius led much of the invasion and invading forces to Jerusalem. Also, other characters involved General Titus, who later became Emperor of Rome, who led the forces of 4 legions to attack Jerusalem. That amounted to about 60,000 troops that came to Jerusalem and to try to break into the city. There was a tremendous amount of fighting going on. Jews coming out of the city to fight the Romans and going back into the city. The city at that time was tied up in a civil war, and at the same time, here's Rome's knocking at the door, trying to get back into the city to reclaim Jerusalem as a part of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So those thoughts brought me to writing the book, and it was an interesting read and an interesting study for me.
Listen, I have a lot of questions that I'm going to be asking here today, but trust me when I tell you, we're only going to scratch the surface. It's going to be up to you to head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Caleb'sJourney.com, followed by SidneyLittle.com. You got to pick up copies of Caleb's Journey. While you're at it, remember, look into his other book, One Step from Glory, America in World War I, because both of these books are fantastic additions to be put onto your shelf. You mentioned a moment ago, Sidney, the research that you had conducted in preparation for this book. I'm curious, man. Let's focus on that here for a second. Was there a particular piece of research that you found that maybe shifted your perspective on certain things, or it was maybe something that you found remarkably compelling or interesting.
There was a book written back in that time, and it was written by a man named Josephus, was part of the Jewish nation, but he went over to the side of the Romans. And after it was over, he did write about the Jewish wars. And this was the main war that he wrote about. The book covers much of the history of Judaism, but this particular part he covered very well as to the battle, the instruments used, and the fighting that went on throughout that period of time, which was about 5 months, as the Romans tried to break down through the walls into Jerusalem and eventually destroyed the temple.
Sidney, as we begin to start to tie out, man, my last few questions here for you, without giving anything away, of course, because we don't want to give away the ending here. What was the central message, or what was the emotion that you were hoping readers would carry with them after reading the final page?
I think first and foremost, the destructiveness and horror of war. And the war was set in two places. Inside the city, there was 3 factions trying to vie for the power over not only Jerusalem, but Judea. But at the same time, pounding at the front gates were the Romans. 60,000 troops marching around the city and trying to break through. They had their siege machines, large battering rams to break down the wall. And so I tried to explain the horror of all of this, as many of the citizens were dying trying to escape the city and go over to Rome, the Roman soldiers, for captivity. It was a terrible time, maybe even a preview of what the end times will be through the tribulation as expressed in Revelation. So I was trying to get people to know what happened even way back 2,000 years. War still is a terrible event.
Listen, I love what you're talking about, Sidney. And listen, I wanted to wait until the end of the interview to pose a question that is reflective, that is introspective. And I wanted to do so purposely because, listen, it's not the purpose of the interview. Your book is showcasing so much more about that particular time in history. Although, Sidney, I'd be remiss if I didn't utilize at least a moment during the discussion to juxtapose between what we find in your book and where we currently are. Now, people, I'm not going to belabor it. I'm not going to get political. This is not the time for it. But, what I think is interesting in your book, Sidney, is, listen, most of us aren't world leaders, right? Or revolutionaries, right? Most of us are like Caleb. We're trying to live our lives among these forces that are beyond our control, right?
That's correct. We're trying to live in peace.
Exactly.
And we are constantly threatened from the outside.
Yeah. I want to ask, man, and again, this is just a personal opinion. This is not necessarily dictating of what other people should believe or should do. But again, the question can be raised if we are looking at ourselves and we see ourselves as a quote unquote Caleb. What is the responsibility of the quote unquote ordinary person in times of great social upheaval, whether it's like your book in 70 AD or in 21st century America?
Let me explain about Caleb. Caleb was seeing the city in civil war. He was seeing the coming of the Roman armies to invade the city, and he wanted to escape that. So he and 30 others left the city late at night and went to another town where peace was in force at that time. It was the town that I named Philadelphia. And as he looked back towards Jerusalem, there were believers who were trapped within the walls. And Caleb's job, I felt, or what he felt he needed to do, was to sneak into Jerusalem and bring the believers out. They could find peace. In his first attempt, he was able to bring folks out, other believers. But his second attempt, he was captured by a Roman centurion and his manipuli. And because Caleb happened to be trained in languages, he was fluent in the Roman language, he was fluent in the Greek language, and also in Aramaic, the Jewish language. So they used Caleb to interpret escapees from the city as to what was going on inside. So this all brought about his ability to be able to work both sides of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah. Listen, I think that there is a powerful reflection to be found here. And people, trust me when I tell you, this is much more than an entertaining read. I'm hoping that this starts conversations with those around you. And I say conversation because I feel like we've gotten to a point where we are no longer conversing. We're so divided, man. And I feel like there's a lot of benefit between coming together and having fruitful, respectful conversations. Let me just make sure I put that out there. It's gotta have respect, man. And I feel like we're missing something right now.
That's where the faith comes in that I write about. That's where Christ came in. I wrote about his crucifixion. I also wrote about Caleb viewing Christ when he made his first miracle of turning water into wine. And I also talk in the book about his crucifixion and Caleb's journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus, where he met up with the risen Christ. Christ is the center of what the story is about.
Yeah.
It is about converting people into faith and into belief. That is what the main focus of my story is about, because Caleb does eventually convert a dying centurion to the faith, but he's always talking about bringing peace through Christ.
And Sidney, I love that message, man, because listen, I'm right there with you. I do think that faith is a cornerstone to all of this. It is a foundation. It is a bedrock to build off of. And I think the important aspect of it is not only just faith, but making sure that it's a purity of faith and not a using of faith in a corrupt way. And again, that's for another conversation, but we could have an hour-long discussion just on that, because I think it's so important, man. And that's where I'm saying, like, Sidney, your book is magnificent because it's going to open the door. There are those areas of gray. It's not so black and white. And I think it's almost easier to reflect on our present circumstances when we view it through a historical lens like this, when we're looking back. And yeah, we can comment on something that we're reading about in a book. Fiction, yes, but historical fiction. So it's been taken from real circumstances. But when we make observations on that, because it's a slight disconnect from where we are, I feel like it's almost a little bit more palatable, right? We can talk about it a little bit more freely. But then through those discussions, we'll start to see the correlation. And that is key, man.
Yeah, that was part of my focus as I started out. That's why the first part of the book is about Caleb viewing Jesus as live being before his crucifixion, and then coming to faith when he was able to speak with the risen Christ. Mm-hmm. And it was part of his message of trying to get people out of Jerusalem who were believers, who were suffering under the persecution that was going on within the city walls. There were three factions trying to rule Jerusalem, and a fourth faction, Rome, trying to bring it back under their control. So I tried to get this story out so people could look to faith is because that's where the end really is in belief in a afterlife and of God.
Absolutely. Listen, man, Sidney, you have done something so special by constructing this book. And people, I'm going to say it again. Head on over there, purchase your copies, because like I mentioned, this is a phenomenal addition to your shelf. Get the conversation started here today, and let's see where we're able to go tomorrow. Sidney, this has been a true pleasure, man. An absolute honor. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
I appreciate your having me, and may the Lord bless those who read the book.